Can I see a show of hands? How many of you guys are from the user environment? Okay, there are some. How about vendors? Okay, the rest are not in IT. All right. So we have, I think, more or less equal balance between vendors and users here. I think, Dr. Lee, you mentioned that the adoption rate in Singapore has been pretty good. But looking at the slides before in the plenary session, every industry averages between 35 to 50% adoption in terms of usage of cloud, right? Abhilash, how did you see in your travels in the region, right, the adoption of cloud, from the SME standpoint? What is the rate of them adopting? Or I saw that they are very interested to get into the cloud, but have they gone into the cloud yet?
Good question. I mean, from sharing the numbers perspective, of course, what we look at is we divide the whole Asia Pac or Asia between emerging vis-a-vis mature Asia Pacific. So in most of the mature Asia Pacific countries, particularly in Australia, Japan, and Singapore, I mean, the cloud adoption rate is quite phenomenal. But coming back to your, industry specific, it completely differs. I mean, the dynamics of SMBs, what we see is completely different. It's quite easy to segment large enterprises. Like, you can easily segment into verticals, industries, because they think alike. I mean, manufacturing industries think alike vis-a-vis services industries. But coming back to SMBs, the entire adoption behavior is completely different. There are no specific decision makers around, and it's completely supported by service providers. So the countries which gives an infrastructure support or support from a government standpoint, the policies, the friendly policies, as you have seen from Dr. Lee's presentation. I mean, Singapore is one of the leading countries in terms of cloud readiness perspective. So the countries who provide those hand-holdings for SMBs will see a phenomenal growth in the next 2 to 3 years' time.
Given, the implementation of the G Cloud, how do you see the adoption of cloud usage in Korea in general?
In general, to be frankly, in Korea, cloud is another famous service. And public cloud service users is, I think, under the 2% of the public services. So the government wants to promote the cloud service from the more.
Okay.
Yeah. And right. They plan the promoting roles in the end of this year.
Okay. I mean, Dr. Lee has shared about Singapore's adoption rate. How many of you guys have heard of MTCS before this conference? Okay, good. How many of you guys have never heard of MTCS? Okay, great. So actually, the team is doing relatively well in Singapore to actually market MTCS as a security standard for cloud. So for those of you who are not familiar, I think there will be people around that will give you information on that. I think going on in terms of understanding the security side of that, right, Hing Yen? What do you think we can do more, right, in addition to, let's say, the MTSC side of, we had put in MTCS, right? Anything else you can do more to increase the adoption rate?
I think there are two sides. Yeah, there are two sides to the deployment story. What we have been doing is to focus on the supplier, the cloud service providers. So a number of them are making progress towards that, and as Mr. Kung mentioned, we made it a requirement in the government bulk tender for public cloud services. So with that, we'll expect to see more cloud services come on board. Okay. So the government is recognizing MTCS in terms of when it procures, and we are working closely with some regulators, including the health regulators, to also align MTCS with what the health sector requires. So on that side, we are moving the big sectors. But at the same time, we recognize that the users must also recognize it's something useful. It would essentially help them to understand what security measures are in place when they are choosing a cloud service. So that will be the real proof of whether MTCS is really useful. Because at the end of the day, it's to address adoption issues.
Okay, so what I think I hear is that if you guys are vendors, right, make sure you guys understand the security standard. And when you guys actually put security in your cloud services, the users, right, going into your service will automatically be certified, right, from the usage perspective, right. So therefore, it is actually quite important. The security side is actually quite important in terms of the implementation of the cloud, right. What do you guys think about the interoperability between cloud service providers? So, for example, right, the biggest concern I have as a personal user, right, is that if I subscribe to a cloud service provider and they now have all my data, right? So can I unpack the data and then pass it to another cloud operator, right? From your experience, Abhilash, have you seen those requirements and any solutions you guys have think about, right, that you have seen in the region?
I mean, that's an interesting discussion point. I mean, interoperability. From an SMB standpoint, because we are tracking this market for the last 2 decades, and from the last 5-6 years point of view in the cloud market, I mean, the biggest challenge or the biggest fear that CIOs or IT managers face is, while they get into an agreement with a cloud service provider, there are certain standard SLAs and all. But in 3 to 5 years point of time, the biggest question is like, hey, what happens to my data after 5 years? I'm just, winding up the SLAs and moving to the next provider. So that's a big question mark there. And from an SMB perspective, they're not well versed with an interoperability. They don't want to, work with different service providers. And that's the challenge, but as well as the opportunity for, a lot of communication service providers I was mentioning and hosters, where, they are the guys who channelize all the products from different vendors and offer to these small businesses. So it should be seen as an opportunity for service providers and agencies like, IDA can, channelize and pool those providers and, get the best product and bundle product for these businesses.
Okay. Hing Yen, any comments?
I think this issue, along with other issues, for many SMEs, are luxury issues because it's something they can afford to invest today. For example, backup, business continuity after the IT system goes down, it is an area that is within the reach of the bigger enterprises. But smaller enterprises, typically, they're hard pressed to make provision of that. The cloud provides opportunity for that, but it is not an automatic service that comes with the cloud. You need to procure that particular service. Okay. But today it becomes an option for them.
Okay. Yeah. So the option is available, right? It's just that they have to understand this from the service provider standpoint. How about Korea, William? What do you think of this issue in Korea?
I have no experience in security field, but the Korean law on developing, they define the users can be notified his data is in which country and which servers, which in systems. The law defined there as like this.
Right. Now, I mean, what is your view or Korea's experience in Korea that the interoperability between the different service providers? So, for example, if I were to go to a service provider, right, and my data is there for the next 3 to 5 years, 3 to 5 years later, I want to change service provider, right? How is there a standard to move? Right? I mean, we hear from Hing Yen that it is a service provider's responsibility. But have you seen any of these services available in Korea?
I said previous, in Korea, the cloud service is very earlier stage. So, Korean government wish to define the comparability of public cloud service providers. Then the Korean government wants to making their standards, the comparability between public cloud service providers. Yeah.
Okay. Another thing that always come on my mind when I talk about cloud adoption, right, is actually the pricing. I mean, I'm not how many of you guys are actually confused with the pricing. You have a service provider from the US who actually sponsor a dinner last night that says that, I can actually reduce the cost drastically. And then our local provider, which wear red, green, and orange, have a different price range, right? Would it be an easier adoption, right, if the service provider actually define their prices clearly, right? Meaning that they are able to then easier understanding from the user's point of view when they subscribe to cloud services, right? Abhilash, when you travel around the region, right? Okay, did you see a big difference in price in terms of cloud service providers?
Definitely yes. I mean, depends on the mindsets of.
So how do you discern as a user, right? How do you discern how to choose the service provider?
I mean, from a cloud service standpoint, I don't think so. Price comes first as a decision-making criteria. More will be the data security and the confidence they have with the existing service providers is the number one. But price being this discussion point, yes, of course, it varies across different countries. The reason being, for example, if you look at an example of an emerging country, the telcos there will take support from the local ISVs or independent software vendors who work closely with various industries, create various micro vertical applications on cloud. So the costing will be completely different. I'm not talking about softwares like Microsoft Office 365. Of course, that will be standard across the region. So, but when you bundle with various business applications for catering to the small businesses, of course, the price definitely varies. And the comfortability lies in, of course, there should be an awareness. And if you keep on bundling, of course, I mean, their expectations will be, lower the price and, the per month or annual price will be completely different. So, okay. I mean, I don't have a definite answer on the pricing.
Yeah, it seems that security is really on top of everybody's mind and price comes second, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. William, what is your view?
In Korea, it's different for personal users and industry users. For personal users, price is the only condition. Yeah, but for the business, the industry users think about more importantly the data security. They want to have their data on their own systems. So Korean business users cannot decide to adopt for public cloud services, such like Amazon. They want to build their own private cloud services in their company for data securities. That is the special features of Korean companies. Then I can say the reliability of the security is the most important things to Korean business users.
Hing Yen?
This morning, Mr. Kung also mentioned an initiative that we undertook called the Cloud Service Provider Registry. When it was first launched last year, what we did was to require cloud service providers to let us know what security they are certified against, and also to submit a self-disclosure form. In the self-disclosure form, they will tell us what is the service level in terms of availability, performance they provide to customer, and where the data center is, what is the backup policy. So in this self-disclosure form, which you can access online, we try to make it clear to the users what the service providers are providing. So it is these type of parameters we think would help users to appreciate which service provider they would want to approach to provide services, provided their requirements are met. If they were to ask the providers separately on their own, some of these parameters they might miss, or it might be wrapped up in some obscure jargon that they do not appreciate. So we try to make it clear and transparent. So we think this will be a major determinant of who they choose to buy rather than just prices alone.
Okay, so for the vendors, please make sure that you guys are on the registry, right? For the users, right? You guys can then pick and choose, right? Your service and standards, so it's become a lot clearer. So the idea is really, we're trying to promote here what are things required, to actually promote the use of cloud. Now, in the last plenary session, the biggest cloud adopters are actually the startups, right? On the technology. The people who have technology understand this space, but the industry is still lagging behind, right? So the question then is that, the startups actually see a lot of benefits, right, in terms of low cost, quick deployment, and things like that. But unfortunately, all of us have legacies, right, in the user environment, in the system, and in the vendors. How do we service our customers? So this session, I hope we will flush out very tough questions for the panel, right, to really see whether it was promote thinking on your part, right, on how to adopt cloud and cloud technology. Now, Hing Yen, we have put up MTCS, right, and manage the security. So this is the number one, sort of in everybody's mind. We have started the registry, right, from the user standpoint. What are things you think we can do further?
So as mentioned by Mr. Kong, there are two new enhancements to the registry is how we can show users that the cloud service providers really live up to the service that they promised to deliver in the self-disclosure form. So we picked two parameters which also feature highly in some of the surveys that users are concerned with. One is performance, one is availability. So through our arrangement with CompuWare, we hope to be able to work with cloud service providers so that we can monitor this in fairly near real-time basis, so that users can know that at this point in time, did you really live up to what you promised in the self-disclosure form? So there's another attempt to provide users some assurance that the cloud service providers do really live up to what they promised.
Okay. Thanks. William, how about in Korea? You mentioned the Korean government is continuously converting to cloud services. What would be the encouragement, right, or new things, right, that Korea government has to put in, right, so that more and more services goes into the cloud? Not an easy question, I know.
Yeah, not easy. Yeah. Definitely, Korean government wants to promote cloud service in Korea, but from now on, until these days, the Korean users can not prefer cloud service, frankly. So, most of the Korean public service provider is marked red numbers. So they have many competency in price. Then they wants to make a low price and make the more users, more customers. Yeah.
Thanks. I think to wrap. Sorry, you got a question? Yes.
My name is Andrew. I'm a publisher of a broadcasting magazine, and one of the sector that uses a lot of data, of course, are broadcasters, especially when we are in the digital domain now. Everything is digital. Now, there is a lot of haze, a lot of issues surrounding the adoption of cloud. So last year, we decided to get a few broadcasters together, and our mission was what you call dispel the haze and embrace the cloud. All right? Because about a year ago, I was in Amsterdam. I asked two broadcasters, one a European broadcaster and one an American broadcaster. I asked them, when do you think you will adopt the cloud? Right? And the BBC guy, the European guy said, Andrew, not for another 5 years. But the American broadcaster said 2 years. Give me 24 months and we adopt the cloud. And as we know already, the London Olympics, part of the transcoding, everything is done in the cloud. Next year, the Olympics in Brazil will find even 4K data will be transcoded in the cloud. But the biggest question we asked last year was, would you embrace the cloud? And the broadcasters says that a couple of things. Yes, CAPEX comes down, OPEX will go up a little bit, but the biggest fear they have is security. Do you want me to put my, what you call, movies,
Intellectual
my
property.
content, everything in the cloud? Nowadays we have a lot of hacking. Can you assure me?
Yeah.
Okay, so the biggest issue is still
security.
Security.
Yes, yes. So I think you're actually absolutely right. And like I said, even the panel has agreed that the first thing on their mind is really security. Right now, if you can crack that nut, then how else can we move on? I mean, I was reading through the internet, and in 2008, right, Larry Ellison from Oracle says that the computer industry is the only industry that is more fashion-driven than women's fashion, right? He says that maybe he's an idiot, but he has no idea what everybody else is talking about, and it's about cloud, right, in 2008. What it is, right, and when is it going to stop, right? But they are going to make cloud announcements anyway, right? So he's not going to spike this thing, right? And basically, he embraced cloud from his perspective standpoint, even though he doesn't understand. So there are many actually people that we encounter, right, still have the same issue, right? And therefore, I think it's quite important for us to come together in conferences like this to figure out what are the major issues. The Korean government has decided to move on the cloud. The Singapore government has actually been in the cloud, and I think this afternoon there'll be a sharing on how the Singapore government did it. And Abhilash has actually shared with us, it is happening in the region, right, with the SME, right? So I think without a doubt, the cloud adoption is going to happen, and I hope this session actually help you stimulate ideas and thinking on how to actually adopt cloud in your own organization. And if you are a vendor, right, how can you actually help your customer to move onto the cloud to actually achieve the benefits of the cloud? Now, with this, I would like to thank the panel, right, for actually participating and sharing with us their thoughts on cloud implementation. Thank you very much.